think I have my own answer for this one, and I'm sure I know you do. And I think this is more of a message to any, say, producers or production filmmakers listening to this. When is the best time to bring in a VFX professional into your production? Let's say you're not necessarily Marvel, you're not necessarily Universal Studios, and you've got the teams already in place for all this. If you're on the independent end, when is a good time to bring in a VFX professional in the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for more indie movies, and I'm not talking like the super lowest budget, but just indie movies in general, I think it's great to have a consultation at script stage when that script is going to start going out. Not necessarily actors, but when you're going to start. What's that?
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm not saying you need to bring on a VFX person full time, but do a consult. And I've done that for some friends. And there are things that a VFX perspective is going to call up that you wouldn't have thought of. And there's going to be location-based things like, hey, what are you thinking? It's going to ask questions that you may not have thought of as a producer. And, from location, from VFX, from, hey, this thing sounds really simple, but in reality, this is tricky to shoot. And then when you're talking about bringing somebody on a more full-time or more regular basis, it really should be when you start putting your team together. Once you know who your DP is going to be, and ideally your director, you start having the conversations, because that's when changes are going to be made, and you don't want those changes made and set in stone before a VFX voice has chimed in, because we can give insight that you wouldn't think of, both positive and negative. We can be like, oh no, that's going to be really hard to achieve, or hey, that's really close, but if you just think about it like this, we can make it even cooler. And I think, having those conversations early, even if it's not on a full-time basis yet, is really valuable. But then once you're in pre-production, depending on how heavy, you should have somebody attending. Like, I generally am in all the production meetings, even if I'm just on the phone listening. And even though that deals with a lot of other departments, it lets me know what else is going on that I wouldn't have known about. Sometimes I have to chime in for wardrobe or for makeup. They'll suggest like, oh, hey, we're planning to do this. And I'm like, okay, but you just decided to make an entire blue screen, and now your wardrobe is going to be more cools and blues. Let's talk about this in a different way. Let's make some changes. And not to change the wardrobe, but let's change my plan then. I'm not telling anybody to change, but it is a factor. Or, hey, you've got somebody in a very constricting outfit, but what you want them to do later and be all wired up, that could be, a tricky thing. Or it's actually, I've had it the opposite, where someone's wearing a big skirt and dress, but you have them falling out of something on wire work. It's just something to think about. I like to overplan so that when something comes up on set at the last minute and changes, I've already hopefully thought of a backup plan. Sometimes I'll get stumped, no question. They'll be like, how about this? And I'll be like, great, let's do it. And then in the background, I'm like, all right, how am I pulling this off? I got 10 minutes to decide what I need to set up, and we're going to go.
And do you ever find yourself saying, we'll fix it in post?
Oh, all the time. I won't phrase it that way. I refuse, but yes.
It hurts a little in the soul each time, right?
I just can't bring myself to say those words, but yes, absolutely. It's back to that sandbag thing I talked about. There are times where I see things happening and it's really not a big deal, and the budget for us to paint something out later can be pretty nominal. And so there are times I'm like, and I won't go to the director or interrupt anybody, but I may go to a producer and say, hey, if it helps, this is not a hard thing for us to do later, if it saves you any grief right now, and then let them decide what they want to do. It also depends. Some productions have me way more involved, and some I'm just quietly sitting there and chiming in the least amount,